Hey, how's it going, everybody? We are in the paint, brought to you by Docsports.com. Scott Spreitzer here. In the middle, Raphael Esparza, and at the other end of the video would be, of course, Griffin Murphy. And we're going to be talking a lot of basketball, as always, as we do each and every Tuesday, and we'll do so throughout the college basketball season. Into March, we've got money shots coming up at the end of the show. We're going to talk about our best bets from this week's show. I'm going to be in search of my fourth straight after San Francisco hit last week. So we'll look to see if we can get that done. So a lot to talk about. We're going to go behind the counter with Raphael Esparza, talk about a couple of big games this Saturday, get you his thoughts on where the line will likely be. But before we get to all of that, before we kick off the show, a quick reminder, if you have yet to become a member at DocSports.com, just want to give it a trial run, click on that link below the video, get yourself set up for a free $60 account, and then you can use those free $60 on any of our daily packages over at DocSports.com. And a quick programming note, we will not be here next week on Christmas Eve. It's that week when there's not much going on in college basketball, just a couple of games for about a 3 or 4 day period. So we'll be returning to kick off 2025. That'll be late. Well, I don't know. We're going to do it late New Year's Eve? I don't think so. We'll do it in the afternoon on New Year's Eve, guys, and then we'll set it up so people can watch it Wednesday night or Thursday at their convenience. But let's kick things off with what did we learn from this past week of college basketball. And guys, you know, a few weeks ago after they played in Maui, we were talking about UConn and their issues and about their poor pick and roll defense, if you will. Having said that, they had only lost one of the games by 2 points to Memphis, one of those games in Maui by 1 point to Colorado. So it wasn't like the wheels were coming off. And then somewhere along the line, in between temper tantrums, Dan Hurley got his team to figure things out a little bit, and they've been fine ever since. They've beaten Texas on the road. They beat Baylor. They beat Gonzaga. And now I believe they're ranked too low. I've seen 11th in some of the power ratings. I think they're better than that. 3-point defense needs some improvement, guys. But other than that, UConn's got it back on track.
Well, I think they got back on track because of their defense, especially holding only Gonzaga to 8 points on fast break points. And I think that their defense is what turned them around. I think they're ranked perfectly because they still have issues shooting the ball. They still have issues guarding the three. So I think they're ranked perfect where they're at because they still have a lot of holes. This is still not the same UConn team we've seen cutting down the nets the last couple of years. But I'm very impressed on how they played their defense, 4-game winning streak, as you said. But they've been winning on defense, not on their offense. And I like how they shortened their bench a little in their last 4 games. So that I'd like the bench scoring. And I think what they have 5 guys and averaging almost double digits as well. So they're spreading the ball as well. But team defense is the reason why they got W's.
Yeah, Raphael, I'm going to agree with you 100% on that defensive side. I mean, when you look at their 3 losses this season, Memphis, they hit 54% from the perimeter and destroyed them on fast breaks. Dayton, 47% from the perimeter, destroyed them on fast breaks. Colorado, 56% from the perimeter, destroyed them on fast breaks. So what did they do wrong? UConn, they simply just weren't getting off the ball fast enough, and they were playing bad defense. This was all on Dan Hurley in my eyes, Scott. When you lose 3 games to teams like Colorado, Memphis, and Dayton, you need to open your eyes. So what does Dan Hurley go and do? He starts applying way more matchup zone defense, 2-3 and 1-3-1. This now forces teams to have to score points in the paint and protect shots from the perimeter. Since Dan Hurley, Scott, has shifted the dynamic of this team defensively, they held Baylor to 35% from the arc. Same with Zaga, only hitting 21%, and they beat them on the inside, which has been the mess for them all season long. So with that being said, they finally found that turnaround, and I believe now UConn has found their groove. Dan Hurley has his team solidified and ready to go, and I believe now going deeper into the season, we're going to see a much different outcome out of this UConn offense and defense throughout the rest of this season, Scott.
Yeah, it was pick and roll defense, guys. It's as simple as that. And they weren't playing it up to the standard that they normally do in Maui. Again, having said that, they lost 1 game by 1 point, 1 game by 2 points, and then they looked a little bit worn down for that Dayton game. I had no fear. I came back and laid like 40 against Podunk State, and they won that game by like 55 right after Maui. So they're back on track. And, you know, it's funny because I was looking at their schedule, and they could be on a 14-game winning streak when they go into Marquette on February 1st. And I thought, man, if they are on a 14-game win streak at that point, I might be looking at Marquette in that game. They got to play Xavier, the typical Big East teams. But, we'll talk about Xavier a little bit later in the show. They just lost their best player.
I would grab future plays on them to win the conference. Some shops still have them posted right now. So let's say if you go up to a 14-game winning streak and all that, get the number now before they start winning, let's say 3 or 4. And those 4-game win streak, they only held their opponents to 63 points per game in that 4-game winning streak. So future play right now, I would definitely look at that if you can find to win the Big East, or even I know some books had to win to make it to the Final Four.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think a future play is definitely the way to go. Search around. You'll be able to shop around and find it. Hey, guys, John Calipari left Kentucky this offseason. We could call it a mutual decision, I guess. It was a marriage that grew stale, as one writer put it in the offseason from Kentucky. That certainly describes it. He was annually underachieving the last few years, despite those mega recruiting classes that he was bringing into Lexington. Then they hired Mark Pope in the offseason. He's done a fantastic job thus far. When Coach Cal left, he took a lot of players with him. But what a job Pope has done. Kentucky returned 0 rotation players from last year, and not a single one of those big recruits stayed around in Lexington after Coach Cal left. Yet here they are. They're ranked 4th in the AP top 25. I think they're overrated a bit, but they are 10-1. They've got 9 transfers, 3 freshmen. They've got a walk-on. I think we can take advantage of Kentucky being a little bit overrated or overvalued, I guess you could say. And I mean that in all due respect to Pope and the job he's done. He's been terrific. But again, I don't think this is the 4th or 5th best basketball team in college basketball. I think they're more in that 11 to 15 range. And I do believe we'll be able to take advantage.
It's Scott.
I mean,
go ahead, Ralph. Go ahead, Ralph.
You have to look at ratings totally different in college basketball, because how many times we're going to see a different number 1, a different number 2. So I don't really look at ratings, but I'm going to give Pope his love.
Let me answer you why I do real quick. I don't judge them by the ratings. Obviously, we all have our own power ratings, but the public, the better.
Well, yeah, the public. That's what I was talking about.
Look at the top 25,
I was talking about the betting public and what the people look at ESPN or KenPom power ratings. And stuff like that. I'm more impressed that the team's GPA is almost double than it was. Give hope for these kids going back to school. How about that? Giving them some love on that. But they have what? I wrote this down. 6 players are averaging double digits. They're a very deep team. They shoot the ball well. Even though they only lost against Clemson, they missed 7 free throws. They lost because they couldn't shoot free throws, and they shot under 40% from the field. I like this team. Yes, when they start playing the bigger names, they're going to be exposed, but hey, when you come into a locker room and you have new faces and guys don't even know what color the jersey to wear, home or away, I got to give this guy some love, because he's turned this around and made some head turns, because not that many Big Blue Nation liked him coming in. They thought they should have got somebody else coming in. So hats off to him.
Ralph, I couldn't agree anymore. I mean, you have 0 returning starters, and then you come back out. They've already beaten Duke, Zaga, and Louisville. And I love he's brought his NBA knowledge into the collegiate level. I mean, Pope has done a phenomenal job. Kentucky, they're currently 1st in the nation when it comes to points per game. They're flying off the ball. They move at an incredibly fast pace, and they're consistent. And that is the biggest thing. They're consistent from the field, and they're consistent from the arc. There's nothing I can say bad about this guy whatsoever. They've suffered only 1 loss all season long, and that came to Clemson. And Kentucky, they outplayed them the entire game. You want to know why they lost that game? They hit 61% from the free throw line, and they lost that game by 4 points. With that being said, Kentucky, they still haven't been battle tested yet. They still have Ohio State on deck, Florida on deck, Texas A&M, and Bama. So we're going to know a lot more about this Wildcats team come mid-January, Scott.
Yeah, and all those teams you just mentioned, Florida, Georgia, Miss State, A&M, and Bama, those are all coming up in early January. We're going to find out real quickly. Now, it doesn't mean they're not a top 25 power-rated team if they go 2-3 in that 5-game set. But I think if they're undefeated going into any of those games, you've got a situation to take advantage of some value there on the other side at that point. Midweek marquee matchup, man. I can't wait to talk about a couple of games that we're still going to chat about. And this is one of those, which is a Wednesday night game, a matchup in Charlotte, North Carolina, neutral site between Michigan and Oklahoma. We're cutting this about 6 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday afternoon. Last check, there was a line on this game. Michigan was 3. And again, that's been about an hour or so ago. The Wolverines, 4 points from 10-0 under first-year coach Dusty May, another first-year coach finding success in his new job. Listen, Griffin, there are a couple of small holes in the Michigan armor, and I could talk about that in just a second. One of those happens to be turnovers. which is something Oklahoma might be able to exploit. The undefeated Sooners, really good at takeaways. Your thoughts? Is that good enough to put Oklahoma over the top in this game?
Well, Scott, the biggest thing for me right now when I look at Oklahoma is, yes, they're 10-0, but they have had the perhaps easiest schedule I've seen in the SEC. It would be a different conversation if they were blowing everybody out, but they're not right now, Scott. They're winning games against mediocre teams by single digits. And I want to get into something against the spread. I went and noted this down. They're 6-4 against the spread as a team this season, and that gives us a really good look ahead incentive. Their toughest matchups this season have been against Providence and Louisville. So that gives us a telltale sign that this team is kind of due for destruction in a sense. The mentality is there. Perfect 10-0 start, but all it takes is one, Scott. Michigan will be by far their most toughest matchup this season. And Michigan's going to come into this game fuming after getting beat by a bucket against Arkansas in their most recent matchup. Michigan got beat simply on turnovers, so that's discipline. But you have to understand, Ralph, bad games happen, being undisciplined happens, and one bad beat does happen. Michigan, though, they've proven all season long they're a very solidified basketball team, and this is not no one-man team. You've got Danny Wolf. He's absolutely incredible in the paint. You've got Golden. He's huge on the pick and roll. And then transfer Namari Burnett is becoming to make his mark as a Wolverine. So right now with this team, Oklahoma may be in for a bit of a shockwave, as I think Michigan is the better team in this one, gentlemen.
I agree because of Michigan's defense, and I'm looking at the total that opened up at 154. This one opened up at -2 and quickly moved to 3. I was probably looking at Michigan if it stayed around the 2, 1.5. I made myself this number 1.5, so I was a little bit off on that. But I'm just not sold on Oklahoma. Doesn't rebound well, they don't shoot well, and if Michigan tightens up and plays that defense, and if they press a half-court press them, we could see a lot of turnovers that Michigan can get on that. I think the under, for me, if I'm going to look at something in this game at 151, but I agree with what you guys said. This could be a very turnover type game and very ugly type of game. And this one could be Oklahoma's downfall in this one. I'm leaning towards Michigan in a neutral site, Charlotte, North Carolina, at the Spectrum Center. I saw WWE at the Spectrum Center. So shout out to the people that work at Spectrum Center.
WWE, there's another show for us.
Right?
I was looking at that Oklahoma defense. They've got a so-so 2-point defense as far as, what they've allowed their opponents to hit from inside the arc. Talk about being tested. Michigan hit 61% of their twos on the season, and that's 6th in the country. So Oklahoma is going to get a little bit of a test on that defensive end when it comes to 2-point defense. Yeah. We always go behind the counter this time every week. We talk with our resident odds maker, Raphael Esparza. Got to ask you a real quick question first. Somebody asked me on Twitter last week after the show, were you a capper and a bettor before you became a bookmaker, or are you a bookmaker right out of the blocks?
I took over my cross the street neighbor's business that he was a bookie back there. As people know that I'm not the healthiest person. I may look young and beautiful on the outside, but inside I'm 99 years old and a body of 100 years old. So when I had my first major surgery, I couldn't play sports anymore. So I was always going to his house because he was like AKA babysitter, AKA go next door, we have to go to work kind of deal with my folks. So that's what his job was. So he was booking and got to do it and took over the business, and then was booking in high school and all that stuff. So I was doing numbers before I was actually placing bets, because in Chicago, I couldn't place bets unless I was going to go across the street and ask my neighbor, hey, can you take $20 on the Cubs for me today, which I felt really pretty weird. But my first bet was actually taking a bet, not placing a bet. So that was, I think Scott froze right there. So that's it. But Kirk Gray mentioned in the chat, wants to know, he has a question mark for Drake. Drake is playing tonight against Kansas State. I guess he wants to know what we think about it. The under at 137 opened up. It's down to 133.5. I thought that was the only play in this game. The game has not moved that much, 1 and 2. Great two-way action, but I think the under was the only play to go on that one, Kirk, if you are watching. So thanks for commenting in on that. But we'll go into the numbers that we were talking about. Which one were Memphis, and we're going to do Auburn or Purdue first?
Well, I was going to mention that real quick. I was going to tell you that It's kind of funny. I mean, first of all, we were both looking at the same thing on Drake. And I do my stuff late at night, overnight, like 2:00 in the morning Pacific time. And I saw that total, and I thought, there's no way that's 137 or so.
Yeah,
when folks can get the plays at Docs at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. So and it came down, as you mentioned. But I love what the Bulldogs have done. I go back to the Lewis Lloyd years with the Drake Bulldogs for the person that mentioned that. I mean, we're talking about that boy had a rainbow arc on a shot that would make World B free, obviously envious. And he took him without even thinking twice. So big Drake Bulldogs fan, the boys from Des Moines. You know what's funny, guys? I was asking, Raphael Griffin about, where he became, how he got into bookmaking. I grew up in the South Omaha area, and there was a little tobacco shop and sports magazine shop called Sportsman's. And there's a whole lot of illegal betting going on back there. And still to this day, they haven't legalized sports betting, and the bookies are very happy. My dad was an engineer. Tuesday nights when I was a kid, he would bring home the sheets with all the lines on them. And that was my favorite night of the week from like when I was 7 years old on, my dad's bringing home the sheets. I get to see what the point spread is. And back in behind the counter at Sportsman's is where you had the chalkboard and all the lines and all that kind of stuff that the public couldn't see. But that's where the very first time I saw the Docs logo was on one of their booklets at Sportsman's when I was a kid growing up in South Omaha, Nebraska. And here it is all these years later. I'm working with Docsports.com, and I got to meet Maury Mosman, the founder, many, many years ago. So it's been pretty cool. Listen, I wanted to, let's talk about Auburn. After we go into the old man story there, let's go into the battle between Purdue and Auburn, the game being played in Birmingham, Alabama. Listen, you look at this, so you got the Boilers who've lost 2 of 3. They're going to have a week off between games. Auburn has Georgia State before facing Purdue, so they'll win that game. But what a machine. They just whipped the Buckeyes by 38. What do you make this number, Raphael?
Double digits. Auburn's just a machine. If you're Purdue, you need to slow the pace down. If you're going to go toe-to-toe with Auburn, then you're going to get blown out. And you're probably happy you don't have Zach Edey because on the court like you did last year. Because if there would have been the same type of game, it would have been worse shape. Because Purdue was always trying to run with Zach Edey, and he was always gassed out in the second half. I like what he's doing in the pros right now. But if you're Purdue, you need to keep the pace, slow, play your type of ball if you want to try to hang around. But Auburn is just Auburn. They're just cruising right now, and I like the way. And they shorten their bench. Now you're going to see a lot of teams shorten their bench. We would watch a whole bunch of holiday tournaments where people are expanding, maybe going 8, 9, 10 guys on a roster. Now you're starting to see that Auburn has done that. They've only going 7 or 8 guys throughout games, and I think that's where they're playing much better. But if you're Purdue, you got to shorten the ball. You have to play half court. It can't be spreading the full court for them.
Ralph, I couldn't agree any more with you right now, man. Auburn, in my eyes, is the best team in college basketball. They can run any type of offense they want. They don't miss shots. They're top 25 in the nation across almost every single offensive metric on a standpoint statistically. Their defense knows exactly when to shift, exactly when to crash boards, and does not hesitate when it comes to popping it and letting it loose. The team trusts each other. They clean up mistakes together, and that is how you win basketball games. And you know who this comes down to? Bruce Pearl. It's his 11th season with the Tigers. The kids love him, and you can tell by their demeanor. Auburn right now, they're playing superior basketball. With home court advantage standing as well, I don't think there is one team in the nation right now, Scott, that can deal with this Auburn team the way that they are playing. I mean, they are absolutely erupting right now, and it's all season long. They've beaten the hell out of everybody. With one loss, I believe, on the season, maybe a bad loss, if I'm not mistaken. This team has literally lit up everybody. So, Scott, I'm all over Auburn in this matchup, and I'm very excited to see what this line comes out at, because without Zach Edey at that point in the paint right now, it's a whole different team. You're relying on Kaufman and Braden Smith. And if these two guys don't go off electric, Kaufman usually goes off every single game. He's 6'9". He's another miniature Zach Edey, I guess we can call him. But if Braden Smith and Kaufman do not have that pick and roll going, this is not the same Purdue team that we watched last season. And Auburn, on the other hand, as I mentioned, they're just throttling right now, Scott.
I lost you there for a second, but I caught the gist of it. And it looks like you have a snowboarding fan there, Griffin. So in the corner of the thing, you guys see it, right? So,
yeah.
Yes, that's my boy.
All right. Okay. Friends can call it. That's all right. Get your thoughts on this line, Raphael, for Saturday is this Mississippi State Memphis game. Easy for you to say. Memphis couldn't miss against UConn and Maui. Part of that, though, we just talked about was UConn's issues on the defensive end. But this team can struggle at times with their three-point line, yet only one team is more accurate from behind the arc. They just don't shoot a lot from behind the arc. The one thing about Miss State, though, in this matchup, they don't defend the three well. They're a little weak when it comes to deep perimeter defense. What do you got here?
This game might be the same game we saw in the NBA a couple of days ago when the Mavericks Golden State Warriors was shooting 83 pointers. This might be that game with Memphis. Like it's Mississippi State. You said they don't guard the three well. When I was doing research on this, I'm like, oh my, we might see 80 in this game itself. And if you're Mississippi State, you just got to wish that they're not hot. Because if Memphis gets hot and it's going to be an ugly game. I made it around 2.5, 3. They're 4.5 favorites against UVA tomorrow. It's going to be a very difficult game for them. And if you're going to watch the Memphis UVA game and then look at the look ahead game, that's a bad idea because UVA is going to play their style of game no matter what. So you might get misconstrued on how Memphis is going to play. So don't handicap this game from Saturday as you're watching the UVA game because it's going to be a totally different type of game. But it all depends on how Memphis shoots the ball. If they can come out red hot at the 3-point line, Mississippi State's going to be due for a big L.
See, I'm going to be on the other side with this one, gentlemen. I see a big mismatch here. Mississippi State, they're dominant on the boards this season, and they can do anything they want on the offensive side of the ball because of Murphy and Matthews are absolutely ice in the paint. The pick and roll with Hubbard and Matthews is incredible. And Mississippi State, they're fearless from the arc because they know they're protected. The team flies off the ball. They know exactly when to drive into the lane. Memphis, they're barely stretching out wins, and their biggest weakness is rebounds. When you're dealing with Murphy and Matthews in the paint, you must hit your shots. Memphis does a good job at it, but it is a must to win this matchup. Memphis right now, they're going to have to run a 2-2-1 zone all game long and smoke all their shots from the arc. That's the only way I see them winning this game. They've got some big wins on the season, but they keep everything tight. I'm very interested to see how this line prints out. Raphael, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on where you think this game was going to come out because in my eyes, Mississippi State, they're the better team. And if it's anything under 4.5 points, I'm with Mississippi State here.
I get like 2.5, 3. I'm a little curious what the total is. I had the total 145, but again, normally when I do my totals, I like to see what they're playing the next game. And I can't watch the UVA game and make a total because it's going to be totally different. That total is probably going to be like in the low 130s on that one. But I could see 2.5, 3, depending on what they do against the Cavaliers.
Guys, I featured a little topic for all the years I've been doing this kind of stuff. And I'm glad we brought it to In the Paint, and it's the under the radar game of the week. I love this stuff. Looking for these teams that, maybe people aren't paying real close attention to, and you can get nice numbers. Like last week we talked about San Francisco and Loyola Chicago, and I ended up using San Francisco as a 4-unit play on Sunday and got the win as they pulled away late in that game against Loyola. We've got one this week, and this week it is Utah State at St. Mary's on Sunday. The Aggies, they're 9-0. They do have UC San Diego on deck before they get to St. Mary's, and UC San Diego's not a bad basketball team this year. They're top 80 as far as power ratings are concerned. Hopefully they'll get by that and be 10-0. And then St. Mary's, they're going to beat Merrimack between now and Sunday, so they should come into this at 10-2. If everything goes as planned, if we can get Utah State to knock off San Diego, not get upset there, and St. Mary's obviously to have more than 2 men on the court and beat Merrimack, then we're going to have a nice setup this coming Sunday. And St. Mary's, Raphael, probably going to be about a 5-point favorite or so with the game being played in Moraga.
Yeah, this is not your same Gales team you see. Normally when you're at home, they're holding your opponents to like 50 points or less, but they're starting to push the ball in their tempo at home, and they shoot the 3 ball really well at home as well. I thought I made that number correctly, around 4 or 5. I can see it around there. I'm really interested to see what the total comes out because you figure the oddsmakers might adjust the total because they're going to smack Merrimack in the next couple of days as well. Their 2 losses, St. Mary's, are a combined 6 points, and one of them was in an overtime loss. So they're contested. They have a tough schedule. They're used to that kind of matchup. And when you go to their house, it's a tough place to steal a road victory. Ask Gonzaga week year after year after year. Yep. If it's a low number, I'm gonna probably take a shot at the Gales if I can get a low number.
Ralph, I'm on the same side as you with that one, my man. St. Mary's all day. Utah State's schedule has been an absolute joke, while St. Mary's has not. One successful win in my eyes with Utah State has come against Iowa. But if you really break that game down, Iowa hit 19% from the perimeter and 50% of their free throws in that matchup. Utah State, they have come out of nowhere. I mean, that's a given. But I don't see this lasting much longer. They have 2 guys that are carrying the load right now, and that's Martinez and Mason. Both of these guys averaging 17 points per game. The rest of their team, all under 10 points per game. It's simple. Run man-to-man defense. to start this game off. And if St. Mary's is getting beat, do you really think Randy Bennett is going to stop and not know how to adapt with this team? He's been running this program for over 20 years. Immediately shift to a 1-3-1 zone and make them beat you from the outside. Utah State allowed Wyoming, Utah Tech, and South Florida all to score at least 60 points plus against their defense. This game, in my eyes, gentlemen, has under written all over it.
Telling you right now, if we get USU to stay undefeated against San Diego this week, before we get to that game, I think we're all going to have a play on St. Mary's come Sunday to deal Utah State their first loss of the season. And again, Raphael, I think it's going to be 6 or less if Utah State does remain undefeated for that game in that contest in Moraga. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm really going to be rooting for Utah State. I won't have a play on them against San Diego, but I'll be rooting for them for other reasons for later in the week. Money shot time, guys, and then we'll wrap things up. $60 free account, everybody. If you're not yet a member at Docsports.com, you just click on that link below the video. You get yourself set up for that free $60. You can use it on any of our daily packages over at Docsports.com. And again, that programming note, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Next week, of course, Christmas Eve. So I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and all that good stuff and happy holidays. And again, we'll be back in 2 weeks on Tuesday, the 31st, with our next report. Let's get to the money shots. Let's start first with Mr. Griffin Murphy, who's apparently the GOAT.
Let's do it, Scott. And you know, I love the money shot, man. It's my favorite part. And I'm going with Alabama at North Dakota. This is December 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Bama coming off a beautiful win over Creighton in their most recent matchup. And this is going to be a massive strength of schedule flop. Bama does not have to deal with anybody competitive until the 4th of January when they get into the meat of their schedule against Oklahoma. That's where it starts. So where does this put Nate Oates and his boys? Well, let's throttle the hell out of our next 2 games against North Dakota State and Kent State and keep this momentum going. But after Kent State, Bama's got South Dakota State. Stay off that game or go South Dakota State with the points. Bama will lay off for health and injury risks in the second half of that game with anticipations of giving their backup some playing time. And they're really probably going to most likely keep their foot off the pedal. North Dakota, they've lost 3 games in a row, 4-8 on the season. What do you think they have going on in their minds, knowing now that they have Bama coming into town? If North Dakota falls behind early in this game, Scott, this team's going to completely fall apart. This will definitely be a double-digit spread in my eyes. It has to be. So I'm going to be laying it here with Bama, coming in with full steam here, pounce on this brutal North Dakota club. So my money shot, gentlemen, is Bama, and I will be laying the points in this matchup. Strength of schedule is going to be a huge impact, and North Dakota does not know what's about to come and hit them.
What you got, Raphael?
I want a game where we talked about Michigan, Oklahoma. I'm going to take the under at 151. I just think defense is going to be key for both teams, especially Michigan. They're going to want to shorten the game up, half-court type of game. And Oklahoma, 3 of their last 4 games have gone under, and their last 4 games at the total over 151 or plus. All of them have gone under the total. So I think this one stays under. Both teams don't shoot the 3 ball really well, so I just think it's going to be a flat game. I just think Michigan goes to Spectrum Center, wins this neutral site court, and this game stays under at 151. I say wait, because the betting public might bet this one up to 152. Michigan's last 2 games, they scored 80 points, but against fast-paced games, Iowa and Iowa. I can't remember what the other team was. Arkansas, and Iowa, which are 2 fast-paced games. Oklahoma is not like that, so I'm going to take the under at 151.
Good stuff, guys. I'm going to attempt to get the 4th straight money shot winner here. We cashed last week with San Francisco over Loyola Chicago. Even though I'm going to like St. Mary's come Sunday if Utah State loses, I'm not going with that game, the end of the radar this week. I'm going to go with another team we talked about, UConn minus the points over Xavier, and you're going to lay doubles, so you got to be comfortable with that. But the Musketeers, they're only 7 points from a 10-1 mark, but one of their 3 losses was that ugly blowout loss to Michigan on a neutral floor. And here's part of the problem for the Musketeers this week. Their leading scorer, their top rebounder, Zach Fremantle, has been lost to injury. In their last game, he actually scored 18 points, grabbed 7 boards, played about 35 minutes against their rival Cincinnati, but he suffered a knee injury. And they're listing him as out for at least several weeks. That was as of Tuesday morning. So he's going to be gone. He's the one guy who can crash the glass at the level of UConn. They don't have anybody else, guys. They've got a couple of big bodies, but they don't play a lot of minutes. And they're not guys that are going to go out there, I think, and make up for a guy like Zach Fremantle. Leads the team in scoring, excellent rebounder. He's gone. And Dan Hurley's not the kind of guy who's going to take it easy on a conference opponent. If he gets up 18, 20 points, it's not like he's going to sit everybody and give the reserves a little time to get some action, not in a conference game. So I think UConn jumps all over Xavier and pulls away to a nice, hefty spread covering win. And again, that game is this Wednesday. So if you want to jump on that game, you'll have to do it. We're off next week. For Raphael Esparza, for Griffin Murphy, for our producer, Michelle, who keeps us on the air each and every week. For those of you who chimed in, we won't hold it against you for calling Griff the GOAT. We won't. Anyway, guys.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, everybody. Come on. A little love. You
guys have a great holiday season. And don't forget, we're here each and every day still at Docs. There's no days off in betting, man. And so we'll be here each and every day of the week. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Until then, let's put them in the win column, everybody.